Hey everybody, this is Tim Chavez from Faith Matters. It's been exactly a year since the world received the shocking news that Russian troops had invaded Ukraine, and exactly a year since the lives of millions of Ukrainian people changed forever. As news of troop movements, cities under siege, refugee crises, and all kinds of geopolitical saber-rattling has come to those of us outside Ukraine, many of us have gone through varying stages of shock, dismay, and fear. But what have been harder to come by than news are stories. The stories of families whose lives have been upended, of women and men who have displayed true heroism, and the bright light of miracles, big and small, shining through the darkness of war. And today, we're bringing you a few of those stories, starting with the story of Svitlana Miller and her remarkable organization, To Ukraine with Love. This is an organization that we've gotten to know over the past several months and have been astounded at the sheer effectiveness of the work that they're doing, providing immediate needs like food, sleeping bags, and generators, even building homes for people displaced by the war. We've been stunned by the impact of each dollar they've raised, all of which goes 100% to direct aid in Ukraine, not to wages for team members or any other expense. Svitlana is a native Ukrainian who founded To Ukraine with Love once she saw the immediate needs of her family, friends, and country. She had been running an international education agency from the United States since 2009, and with her team and contacts in Ukraine, Svitlana was able to mobilize aid in a remarkably short amount of time. She was joined in this conversation by her team member at To Ukraine with Love, Nancy Cadjan. Nancy has over a decade of experience working with the Global 500 C-suite and the heads of HR in the biggest organizations in the world. She lived in Russia in the early 1990s and has been connected to Eastern Europe for the past 30 years. She immediately jumped in to help with both feet when this crisis began. We were really honored to have these two on because they've been instrumental in helping us be more connected to Ukraine. Through them, we've met families whose homes have been literally destroyed in a moment by direct missile hits, and we've been able to learn from and connect with on-the-ground heroes who have changed everything about their work and their lives to help relieve suffering. We really believe that these two and this organization are remarkable in the work that they're doing and the impact that they're having. If you listen to this episode and feel moved to help, you too can be a part of their direct relief efforts, getting food on tables and roofs over heads. You can find out how to help or get in touch at toukrainewithlove.org. Thanks as always for listening, and with that, we'll jump right into the conversation.
All right, well, Svitlana and Nancy, thank you so much for being with us. We're just so happy that this came together at the perfect time and that we get to sit down and have this conversation. So we're really delighted to have you both.
It's great to be here. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
We have so much respect for you and love you both as individuals, and we're just excited for everybody to hear this story. It's been almost exactly a year since the war in Ukraine started, and so maybe you can just look back on this last year and remember where you were this February in 2022 and talk about, what were you doing, what were you thinking about 12 months ago, and then tell us how this foundation got started and how you connected with each other.
So I just remember going to Cancun in January of last year for my anniversary. It was my 15th anniversary. We went to Cancun, and just one day we woke up in our hotel and every channel in Mexico was showing the troops lining up on the Ukrainian border, the Russian troops. And I had this feeling of fear just come over me quickly, and it had been gradually happening, but that day they released how many hundreds of thousands of troops were there, and I just remember feeling so helpless and thinking there's just no way is this really going to happen. And my husband's in the military, and he was saying it's probably going to be a really slow invasion through the east, like in 2014. They're going to try to go slow because the world would never let them do anything else. We're in the 21st century. It's not going to be horrible. It's not going to be like the movies. He always said that to me because I'm from the capital, from Kiev, and obviously worried about my family, my grandparents, my cousins, all the friends. That's who I know. I know people from Kiev. And so my husband always said, it's probably going to start in the east where there's no one left, people evacuated. And so he always would say that to me. And I thought he knows more about this, and that's got to be. But I just remember feeling scared and going on Facebook and writing this post about my childhood memory of my grandma, who growing up, she would always tell me of her memories when she was 6 years old and the Germans invaded Ukraine in June,
Oh my gosh.
in June of 1941. And she said that her young parents were frazzled. They heard the news on the radio, and they told the kids to go under the table and sit under the table, covered with a tablecloth, and wait for them to get back while they made a plan and talk to the neighbors. And they were told not to walk close to the windows and look through the window, because the tanks were already en route to the capital. And she knew that someone was coming to hurt them and take away their freedom, and something horrible was going to happen. And I just remember her telling me that story always growing up, and of this fear she had with her and her little brother hiding under this table, not peeking through the curtains, even though they were so curious, but they listened to the parents and never came close to the windows because they were so scared. And I just had this sick feeling that something evil is coming again. And the story of my grandma that she always shared with me, that somehow my people are reliving it. Something's coming, something awful, and there's nowhere to hide. So just, I remember that was my first time really thinking what's going to happen now. And then 3 weeks later, it was February 23rd. And I just remember we had just finished eating dinner. It's like between 8 and 9 p.m. And I saw my husband, he had an iPad in his hand, and he was watching something, and just the look on his face when he looked up at me, I knew exactly he didn't have to say anything. I knew. And so I ran up and grabbed the iPad, and I saw rockets flying in the Capitol. And I just ran to my phone and I called my grandma, and she wasn't answering. And I kept calling over and over. And when she finally answered, I could tell I woke her up. And I said, "Grandma, are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, why?" And I said, "It started the war. I think there's an attack on the city." And she said, "Well, I don't hear anything." And then we were FaceTiming. And so I saw her walk to the window, and she said, "Oh my, I see it and I hear it now. You're right." And that's the day I'll never forget. Just being there with her, FaceTiming, and knowing that, like, is this the last time I talk to her? How long do we have? Who else is going to be affected by this tonight?
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Thank you for
Thanks for sharing that.
That's so hard to imagine.
Nancy, would you want to walk through some of your initial, what happened when you first heard? And
Well, I served an LDS mission in Moscow on the very first mission. And then at BYU, I met my husband, who's from Moscow. He's Armenian, and he was obsessed. I mean, all of us were obsessed in my house, but he was listening 24/7 to the news. And we have Russian state TV in our basement because his mother lives with us, and she watches that. And so we were watching the Russian side, and we were watching the Ukrainian side and the German side. And he was 24/7. That's all he was doing, was listening to the news and just obsessed about it. And we kept saying, no, there's no way. Putin is not that dumb. He's not going to invade. He's just saber-rattling. He just wants to show the world that he has power. And then when it happened, same thing. I just started crying. I couldn't do anything. I didn't know anybody in Ukraine at that point, but it was just like a brother fighting a brother, right? And I mean, I had always just thought that Ukraine was, a brother to Russia, and that there was no way they would ever attack them. And so to me, it was just this horror happening. And for a week, I couldn't do anything. I just sat there numb, watching the news and crying, and everyone in my house was upset. And it was horrific. And I didn't even understand why it was so personal to me, but it was just so personal.
yeah,
And, we speak Russian in our house. We always knew that there was, there had always been evil in Russia, but we just never thought in the 21st century that this could happen.
yeah,
A full-on invasion of a sovereign nation. It just was unimaginable to me. And I have a really strong sense of liberty and freedom. And to have that happen and watch it happen was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think what personalized it for me was actually your uncle, Lana, Vasil, who's a very close friend of mine, and we played tennis together. Who's from Ukraine, spent much of his life there, and when it first started, I remember feeling like you, just sort of that feeling of this is unbelievable. But then going and talking with Vasil like really brought it home for me, like this is real, because I knew that he was basically up all night speaking to friends and family in Ukraine and sort of like checking on them and seeing what he could do from afar. And then he'd work the whole next day, and then night would come and he'd be back on the phone in Ukraine.
Right. Yeah.
And just seeing he's just an incredible person. You could sense the emotional toll, but also I've never seen that guy without a smile on his face, you know? And that sort of like started to represent the spirit of the Ukrainian people, you know, for me. And I'm so glad that I have that friendship, because that's what eventually connected us to you and the incredible work that you're doing. So maybe that's a transition here. And you could talk about, everyone knows sort of how this unfolded in the news, but they don't know necessarily the needs that you've seen so closely on the ground over the past year. So could you talk about how you got into the work that you're doing now with To Ukraine with Love, and some of the needs and stories that you've seen?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So it was interesting. My husband's in the Utah National Guard, and he was leaving for Europe a couple of days after the war broke out. They were leaving to fly NATO missions and in Western Europe. And I remember just praying for help for Ukraine every day, hoping, because the world at this point, people didn't know, is this the kind of conflict where NATO is going to step in and help? People were praying for that in Ukraine. And I was praying for that. I thought they can't stand a chance against Russia. That was back then considered, one of the strongest armies in the world. And so we can't survive this on our own, I thought. So along with the rest of the Ukrainians, I was thinking, it would be great if NATO could step in and help our people, help fight, close the sky so that they couldn't keep dropping bombs on innocent civilians. And as I'm praying for this with the rest of Ukraine, I remember my husband's leaving to fly NATO missions in Western Europe. And around that time, actually the day before he left, there were some rockets that hit really close, almost on the Polish border. And so on the news and every channel, they're speculating, like, what does this mean? Does this mean that NATO is now going to go in because they're so close and there's power outages in Poland? So what does that mean? Is that enough for NATO to want to step in and help Ukraine? And so as I'm hoping for this help and thinking maybe that's enough and NATO could step in, I have a husband who is finishing packing his bags to go fly these NATO missions, and their mission is all of a sudden completely different because this war broke out in Ukraine and it's changing. Their direction is a little different, what they're going to do than what they usually do. And so I had this unrest, inside me. So as Darren's packing to go, I said, you're coming home, right? This is not going to be like you're going to go to Western Europe and end up fighting Russia somewhere. You're going to come home. And he said, well, I thought you were praying for NATO to step in and help Ukraine. And he said, please don't pray for help when you're not willing to sacrifice. If you're praying for help, you have to be willing to be a part of the solution. So if NATO goes to fight, I'll gladly go and I'll fight too. And that really touched me to the core. So he left, and I was thinking this all the time. I thought, I can't just be praying for help. And at this point, I can't eat, I can't sleep. I'm checking all the time. Is everybody okay? Are my cousin's kids okay? Are they still in the bunker? What's lost? Which schools are bombed? Because things just started. It's different seeing it on the news and recognizing places and so, starting to help forming the decision that, okay, we're actually going to send aid, collect, reach out for people, communities, ask them to help. And then we know how we're going to ship that aid, and we know exactly what they need and how to get it there. Just getting to that point where a plan formed. And all of a sudden, I was busy all the time when I knew what to do. It's like 18 to 16 hours a day. I knew what it took to get the aid, to which people to reach out to, first personal contacts, how to get the aid into Ukraine. So on one hand, it was like I had no downtime left. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, that was for the first time I felt peace. Yeah. Like that peace of mind. I'm doing something. I'm not just sitting. Because I thought literally that I was going to lose my mind, just checking all the time, trying to combine the two realities of feeding my kids lunch and then watching on my phone, people in the bunkers and hearing the rockets drop like that. You could literally lose your mind doing that. So the only way was really to be starting to do something for Ukraine. Yeah. There was I felt like that was my only way out of insanity.
Wow. So I guess it didn't even have a name yet. You organically kind of discovered these needs and needed somewhere to like put all of this energy. And it sounds like it was just a really organic process. So what were the first needs that you became aware of?
So the first needs were not what they are today. It's interesting to think back. And I always compare it to like the pandemic. Yeah. When I remember going to the local Albertsons and they said, for the first time in the history of Albertsons, we've sold out of everything we had on the shelves. And I was like, what? That's crazy. So like if you add bombs to that, like the kind of chaos and like fear plus chaos. Yeah. Yes. Like stores clear, there was nothing on the shelves, nothing in the pharmacies. And then because the logistics chains were disrupted, all of a sudden trucks weren't, in fact, like truck drivers, they're driving all of a sudden on mined roads. And so many people were like, I'm not doing that. So you didn't have people delivering food, medications, like basic stuff like baby formula and, diapers and stuff that you can usually go and get at the store. You didn't have access to that. And so like first aid kits, that was a big deal. Ukraine ran out completely, really quickly. And so the first things that we ordered were just things to keep people alive. And it took like maybe 6 weeks from the start of the initial attack for the logistics chains to, go back to working and for stores to having, food back on the shelves. And so the first few shipments that we did, they were quite a bit different because of those basic things that people ran out of and had no access to. Yeah. And then after that, we just started buying right there on the spot in Ukraine, supporting the stores and getting things even faster to the people. But the first few shipments were just food and first aid kits, diapers and baby formula. And because several people were like, what can we do to help you? Is there anything we can do? And but people aren't usually ready to like leave their lives and go and do what you're doing. But like Nancy could replace like 100 people for a charity if you just with her energy and the things that she can do. She's a multitasker and she knows what needs to be done and she does it fast. And so people would, donate what they could. And then people's prayers, I felt them on my behalf. Yeah. But Nancy,
I actually am really curious about that. What do you mean? Was it just knowing that people were praying and that gives you confidence, or are you feeling like some deep power?
So when the war broke out, Darren left on his deployment and I was with my kids and neighbors were lining outside my door. I mean, the street was covered with Ukrainian color ribbons and people drew beautiful cards for me. My Cub Scouts brought me beautiful things. People came and wrote notes and it meant a lot that people were thinking about me and praying for me. And I could feel it because the things that I was starting to do for Ukraine, I saw miracles coming fast, like miracles. I looking back, I understand that that must have been the sum of so many people's prayers on my behalf, and the things that I was able to do. they were like, I was working in a different time realm. Like things that should have taken weeks and months were just getting done in hours. And
Wow.
I was like, what's
Like
going
outside of
on?
your
Like,
control.
just
Yeah.
outside of my control.
Governmental things that take years were just like turning over.
I
Didn't
know.
you say that even someone at the IRS reached out
Yes.
to you to help?
Yeah, that was the miracle in and of itself. I had a friend reach out to me and say, you know, if it was a tax exempt organization, then we could probably help you with a donation, a significant donation. And so I called a friend who specializes in nonprofits, and he did all the filings. And he said, but I got to tell you though, it might take 6 to 9 months for this to come through. Like local staff, when you have a charity that's helping like local kids with, you know, a literacy program or something like that, that goes really fast. But if you're trying to take money outside of the US to help other causes, it could take close to a year. And so I said, okay, well, let's do this. He said, just so you know, IRS right now is still backed up from 2020. So you should know this. So your expectations aren't that something will happen fast. And so I said, no, I totally understand. He filed it. But then the very next business day, I had on my screen, there was a call coming in and it said IRS. And so I answered the phone and the guy said, hey, I'm here to talk to someone who is in charge of this application. And he said, well, I just wanted to make sure that you understood, because I saw an expedited application, you know, and things like that. This will take a while, you know. And I said, no, it's been explained to me. I understand. And then he said, but I also see that this is for Ukraine, and I'm following the news and I know what's going on in Ukraine. It looks terrible. He said, I'm going to expedite this and you're going to get your 501c3 status by the end of the week.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I was like,
So
what?
crazy.
So I called my friend who had helped me file. And I said, Mike, you'll never believe the call I just got. And he said, in all my years of practice, I have never heard of
I'm
this.
sure,
That
yeah.
is
Yeah.
amazing.
Wow.
So I thought, you know, God is on our side.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if it weren't something he wanted and supported, then it wouldn't have happened. So I thought, okay, we just need to move forward then. Okay, we're
Yeah.
Wow.
moving forward.
Can I ask you, I still want to hear how you ended up really stepping in, Nancy, but while we're talking about this, like I would just love to hear, how do you reconcile those kind of miracles with the horror that's simultaneously going on? It feels like there must be some frustration that if heavenly parents can swoop in and pave the way to get a 501c3 status in 3 days, you know, like why aren't there miracles happening on the ground in Ukraine? I mean, I know there are miracles, but like, why is there a war? Like, why is the war still going?
Yeah.
You know?
Why are children dying? And
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
like, yes, yeah. And so I imagine that's something that you've had to really wrestle with this year.
I was just telling Tim that when I was listening to,
Oh, Jared Halverson.
yes,
Yeah.
the podcast episode is called "Don't Let a Good
Yeah.
Faith Crisis Go to Waste."
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And as I was listening to that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I have been going through all these phases from the start of the war. You know, because I always knew the basics. You pray and your prayers are answered, or they're not, because maybe it's not best for you right now. But I've literally questioned, I've gone back questioning like everything I knew when the war started.
Mhm.
And it's been an interesting journey for me. For example, there was a day when I got back to the US from visiting Ukraine and seeing the destruction and being shaken by it. You can never get used to it. I can't, certainly. I go and I see things, then they shake me, and I have a lot to process, and it's hard because on the airplane, when I fly back, I can't really quite keep myself as busy as when I'm at home and I'm taking calls and I'm doing a million things. But on the planes, usually I just feel really bad for people, whoever sits next to me on the plane, because they just watch me process, and then I just usually fall apart and it doesn't look pretty. But I remember flying back, not back home, but to, I think, California that day to get quickly to a tumbling and cheer competition for my daughter. And I watched her say a prayer to win. She really wanted to win this competition. They worked hard, and they did. They won. But I remember thinking, like, I wish I could swap this win and this answer to this prayer with some of the ones I just saw in Ukraine, the prayers that aren't being answered. And I thought a million times or more, like the words of President Holland when he said that for every Nephi whose prayer gets answered, there's an Abinadi who burns in the fire. And I just thought, these people are burning. Like, why are their prayers answered to so many? And then why don't these people deserve their answer right now? I've questioned it so much. Like, why, if there is a God, and I've never in my life questioned that there was an existence of a loving Heavenly Father, but how could he possibly watch children die and women in this awful way, like how, and I hate that like having these thoughts is awful, like, because it takes you back to like, wait, what do I believe? Like, do I really believe the things I always thought I believed, or do I not? I know it will take years to see the things that are happening in Ukraine right now, how it will lead to a better Ukraine. Like, so definitely there's never something so awful that Heavenly Father won't find something good to come out of us. I've seen this
Definitely
a lot. I don't have all my questions answered. But.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying. It feels like it's not that God is choosing to burn Ukraine or is choosing to refuse to intervene, but that maybe agency is always at play. And there's no too bad that it can't be alchemized for something miraculous and beautiful afterward. And it feels like that's kind of what you're seeing. Can't explain the destruction, can't explain the horror. And paradoxically, there are these miracles happening in its wake. And that works for me.
Well, and the miracles that happen in the darkness are just so vibrant.
In the darkness.
Right. Yeah. So they happen in the darkness, and then you see them, they shine out. Right. So that's one of the reasons why I keep doing this, is because I get to see the miracles and they keep me going in the midst of all of the pain and suffering. To see even the small miracles are just incredible. And when you see the gratitude that people have for something really small, a sleeping bag, you'd think, what's big about a sleeping bag, or 3 months worth of firewood. And people are so grateful for that.
Yeah.
And for them, it's a true miracle.
Yeah.
And we have so much we don't think about, that these small things can be just life-changing miracles for them. It keeps them alive. You see people, we hear all the time about people living in sheds, and they're happy that they have a roof over their head.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's 3 degrees outside.
Yeah. It's crazy. Or, people who haven't eaten in days, and we're able to bring them food, and they're just so happy for just basic necessities. It actually puts everything that we have in our life in a big spotlight. And, there's a guilt factor to that as well. Why, Lord, do I live where I have so much bounty, and there are people who suffer so much? And the only way that I can deal with that is to say, okay, in their suffering, what can I do? What out of my bounty can I give to them? And it's not necessarily always money. Mine was time and skill, right? The Lord, like literally my whole life was set up to do this. And just everything, every skill that I ever learned, every job I ever had, speaking Russian, it all just really culminated in this, having a husband who would support me. And so I figure out of that, I can give everything I have. And hopefully, and I see the miracles, and that's the thing that keeps me going. Yeah. It's just even the smallest thing.
Wow.
Well, and I want to ask too, I think there's a perception maybe sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, that like people just, they want to turn a blind eye, you know, it's just like, it's too hard. But I think maybe in some cases that's true, but I think mostly I'm wrong. And the bigger problem is that people don't know how to help. Exactly. I think people generally are generally good. And so like, maybe you could get a little bit specific too about like what's going on now with your nonprofit, and for the people that are listening to this and wanting to help, like how can they get involved? Maybe you could share some of the things you're doing now and some of the miracles that are happening.
And you're exactly right. We have people come to us and they give us small sums of money or large sums of money, and they thank us for taking their money.
Right.
Like, this is the last thing I ever thought somebody would thank me for. Thank you for taking my money.
Right.
Right. But because they don't know what to do, they don't know how to help. And one of the things that Svitlana has been really good about is connecting people. I mean, she had this vision that we need to connect the donors right to the people that they're helping. But she realized that we need to let people see exactly where their money's going and what they're doing to help. And so really from the beginning, that was the understanding that if we can connect people together and build this bridge across the planet, and you can see that this Ukrainian mother who needed diapers is just like you when you go to Walmart and pick up diapers, right? Or like my mother-in-law lives with us and I go grocery shopping for her. And so I said to her, just like I go grocery shopping for you, I do this work so somebody can bring groceries to some grandmother or babushka in Ukraine. So I call it DoorDash Ukrainian war style. So the war style DoorDash, they literally bring it to people's houses who are invalids or who are elderly, who live in little towns that, like Svitlana said, the roads are mined and there's no way to get there. And we have really amazing drivers who put their lives at risk. And they're volunteering to take this aid to people that they don't know. And they're knocking on their doors and then giving them food for a month and their prescriptions so that they'll stay alive and all these things. And I think about how many times I drive to Walgreens, right, to get my mother-in-law's prescriptions. And it's just easy. I just drive in, go through the drive-through, wait 5 minutes, and I'm done. Right. Well, somebody has to drive down a mined road. So if I can give $50 to make that happen, or I can give $100, or I can get a sleeping bag for somebody, that's just such an incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really personal because I see what's happening I have that same thing I'm doing in my house. And then I see somebody doing that for some other grandmother in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I love that. I really think this is such a powerful part of what you do, this connecting families, because I think I've never been to Ukraine or Russia. And
I've never been to Ukraine either.
Really?
No.
Wow.
But I felt like that made it hard to picture the people and the city and what war looks like. And so we've had a few opportunities to meet some of these families over Zoom. And it feels like a life-changing experience for these reasons that you're saying exactly. Like as soon as you see each other and we're speaking through you, actually, usually a lot of the translator, and you just realize these are people that you would be good friends with. You can just feel kindred spirits. And
your kids are the same age.
Yes,
right?
and like and this was such a powerful moment. One of the families that we met had two daughters actually that were the same ages as our daughters, and I'd had that thought: you can do something really, really big, or you can do something smaller, like a sleeping bag. And the sleeping bag felt so small. And then we've had a really cold week in Utah, and it's been in like the teens every morning. And I was realizing a sleeping bag, when it's my kids that I imagine cold, nothing else matters. Right. Like nothing else matters as much as like if we're sleeping without heat, how much would I give to get a sleeping bag for our 5-year-old? And I realized how important that connection was. How had I never had that thought? Until I saw a mom that looked like me and like had daughters who looked like mine. And instantly you realize we are totally the same. And I think in a lot of ways, imagining that they're so different, I can't relate. That's sort of a coping mechanism to protect us from feeling the pain that we would feel if it was us or if it was our family. And being together in that way, even just over Zoom, that wall just completely dissolved. And I felt like my heart broke in the most connecting way. Like, I love what you said about the bridge across the world. Like that is what it felt like. It felt like these people are our family. And it also felt so clear that like this abundance that we have is so much a product of being able to count on peace. We've had so much stability that there's this abundance all around, and we take it for granted, and we would look and feel and need exactly the way these families would in wartime. And that's so much out of our control.
I think it's a normal thing for people to distance themselves from the pain, because if you walked around in the pain that Svitlana feels every day, I mean, how would you function, right? You would need something like a charity to keep you going. So it's nice and easy to say, oh, that's so bad that that's happening over there, right? And I wish I could help. But when you become pricked by the Spirit and you realize that I can do something, right? There's something, even if it's small, I can do one thing. And that's all it takes. When we first met, I gave a donation and I said, I'm sorry it's so small. And she said, you just fed a family for a month. That's not small to that mother who can feed her child tonight.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I'm hooked.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, and just that thought that I can do one thing.
Mhm.
I can just do
And
one
that
thing
maybe
today.
that's what the pain is for. Like maybe
Yeah.
that prick, like maybe it's not to make you feel bad. Maybe it's the spark that's supposed to get you moving. How is that pain supposed to
Yeah.
translate into some kind of relief?
And
Yeah.
as a follower of Christ, we have to suffer. We mourn with those who mourn. We suffer with those who suffer. And that's one of our callings. If we bear the name of Christ, is to do that. And that is not fun.
Mhm.
It is a lot easier to just, go around and say, I know the church is true and everything's happy, and to thank the blessing when we find the car keys after the prayer, right? All those things are really simple and it feels good. But to really sit in the pain with someone and help them the way that they need to be helped.
Yeah.
And so in this, we found what the needs are. And that's really where it gets down to the brass taxes. Can
Yeah.
I part with something that is so important to me? And that's, can I part with a dinner or, a movie night or something like that and give?
Yeah.
And it's not just that you're
Mhm.
separating from the thing. It's also, I think, just this mentality that I'm really going to look at this pain. It
Yes.
forces you to really
Yes.
face there really is suffering that I'm not ignoring. And
Yes.
I think in some ways that's even the more painful choice.
Well,
Yeah.
and I want to point out too that this is something that's actually, we can't take for granted that, giving in this way actually brings you that connection. And that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's actually something unique that you guys are doing that is
Yeah.
above and beyond any nonprofit that I've ever seen. And which is, I think, one of the major reasons we wanted to bring you guys on, because it's so incredible. Our experience, having been involved a little bit with, fundraising and some of the projects that you've done, the way that you've brought that connection around back to us, where we've actually been able to meet families that are affected. And Nancy, I have made the joke that I think since we first got involved, I've gotten a text probably every day from you, just
Sorry.
no, it's amazing, because your money, with the way you guys are doing it for donors, is not disappearing into the
Yeah.
ether. It's very clear that not only do you know what the needs are on the ground, but you're actually bringing it full circle and saying this is how you're being affected.
And we know
people are
who
being
it
affected.
goes to, right?
Yeah.
We're tracking who it goes to. Literally, it goes from our hands, from your hands to our hands, and then directly into the hands of the people who need
Yes,
it.
and this is an important point, because it sounds like, and I think the way that I understand it is that any wages that are taken by the team of the nonprofit are being covered by a donor,
benefactor,
specifically
yeah.
a benefactor specifically for that. But any other donors that you're getting, all of their money is going straight into Ukraine.
Yes.
Is that
Every
right?
dollar.
That's
every dollar.
That's just incredible.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me too, as Aubrey and you were speaking, Nancy, that when you said we need to mourn with those that mourn, that work that you're doing in bringing it full circle back to us, where we're actually feeling and having those connections, is helping us live our baptismal covenants in that way. I feel like you've gone so above and beyond to help us live it out in that full Christian way. It's been really meaningful.
And we spend time praying about that. And so we have a volunteer team. Most people are volunteers. They're all LDS. We pray together. We go to the temple and fast and pray for things when we need an answer. We rely on the Lord to do this work. We'll sit there and think, how in the world are we ever going to do this? This person needs this thing and we cannot provide it for them. There's nothing else we can do. And then we get a text. Hey, we were thinking about this and we'd really like to help with something. Or, we haven't contacted you in 6 months, but, we just thought about you. And then the answer's right there. Or when we were thinking about sleeping bags in October, we don't know anything about sleeping bags. We don't know how to buy them. So we started looking them up on Amazon. How many sleeping bags can we get off of Amazon in Poland? Right. But at the same time, my hairdresser's husband is a purchaser for a recreation outlet in Utah.
Oh, wow.
And it just came to me in the middle of the night, call Patrick. And through Patrick and his team and other people, we've been able to learn all about sleeping bags and find new connections and be able to get them, from a manufacturer. Within a week, they go from the manufacturer to the hands of somebody who needs it. I mean, how incredible is that? The connections across the world that we never would have gotten if we hadn't listened to the Spirit And these
Yeah.
things come to our mind all the time.
We try to solve some of these problems with our own mind.
Yeah.
And we think like, okay, we need this, and this is, so let's pray for this. Or in December, we were fasting. The whole team was fasting for a miracle. And we thought that that miracle would be getting us shipping by plane, fast shipping of sleeping bags, of thousands of sleeping bags. And we just were praying for that miracle, praying that it would happen. Then we started fasting because we thought, okay, we really need this. This guy is taking a pause and he's going to give us his decision. And so as we were fasting, like the next day, someone calls and turns out there's a completely different resolution that's faster and better in every way.
It's true. There were so many barriers in front of us. We thought we had the answer, right? We knew what we were going to do. We had planned it all out. But those barriers led us to asking the Lord in humility and then getting a much better opportunity put in front of us where we could bless more people. So
What are you praying for now?
We're praying for the miracle of businesses wanting to support our housing project.
Could you talk about that project and how that works and what's going on?
Yeah, we started with helping one family fundraise for a house. It seemed like it was such an expensive project, and it was actually my son, who's 13, who was really excited about it, and he wanted to make it his summer effort. And at the end of the summer, it turned out that other teenagers joined them, 3 more boys, and then they fundraised for 3 houses instead of 1. But we didn't realize that the miracle was waiting for us. We teamed up with a group of wonderful people who had the skill to put together a team of Ukrainian wood craftsmen, people who know how to work with wood really fast and efficiently. And we launched this housing project. It was amazing to see that while we were one by one helping families receive houses that got placed on their land next to the destroyed homes, hooked up to their utilities, water, sewer, just everything that's existing is being reused, and you get a house that you can live in on your land next to the home that you lost in the war. And so it was a wonderful project. Amazing, generous people tuned in to help. And we were able to make 30 houses get built and delivered to the families around Christmas and a little bit after. And it was an amazing thing. People felt generous around Christmas that they wanted to help. We had different groups, from high schoolers to neighborhoods to just families doing this kindness, and not just give houses to these people who lost their homes in the war, but also help employ 56 Ukrainian people who lost jobs in the beginning of the war, who had no way to provide for their families. And so, but with the last house that we gifted in January, in February, we had no more houses that were donated for. And so we're currently praying for a miracle. We've sat down with several businesses and we invited them to just join this effort to possibly look at this year. The builders have a capacity to build 20 houses, and
every month.
Per month. Thank you. And if businesses can take, 1 house a month or 1 per quarter, that's what we're hoping for. We talked to several people who expressed interest, and I know that there are a lot of good people waiting on the other side, waiting for this miracle. The builders, there are 12 builders who are members of the church, and the rest are strong Christian men who start every shift with a prayer. And we hear that they pray for this daily right now. And we're combining prayers to hoping that a miracle will happen. And somehow someone will say, let's do this. Let's unite efforts and continue to provide houses. $18,000 for a studio house. It's not as much as you would think.
18,000
for a studio house. And then you add $5,000 for every extra bedroom. So a family of 10 people who received the house, the 4-bedroom house, that was $30,000. So it's not what you think. It's not hundreds of thousands, but these houses come turnkey with furniture and appliances and
pictures hanging on the wall, like
pictures,
cozy.
Cozy. You've seen them. They're nice and they're freshly made. Yeah.
And they look like modern cabins. Like they're just beautiful and clean. And we heard one Zoom call while a family walked through who the man said something like, this house has such a good soul. Yeah. And it was like, oh, you can feel that. Yeah. You can feel that when they walk in. Like it was created with so much love and it was gifted with so much love. And they're built so fast. Like this is solving the problem of cold in the same month that they're still cold. We got to meet Yuri, who is he in charge of building in Ukraine?
He's one of the 3 partners.
Okay. And he was in Utah, so we got to meet him. And he was talking about that they can literally build a house start to finish in 4 days. He said it takes longer to pour a foundation than it does for them to build the entire home, which just blows my mind. But it's so incredible. And we've seen that. We've seen families be told that they were going to be getting a house and then get the house like 3 weeks later, be walking through the door of a fully furnished home on their own front yard, 20 something days later.
Well, and I mean, it gives the neighborhood, it gives, the family, it gives the extended family like a hope that people care. The house that had the 10 family members, 2 of them are serving in the military, and they were released from the front line to come to the house gifting. And then they said, well, we'll take back this story of what happened to us, and it'll give us more strength to keep fighting. And we'll tell all the people we're fighting with that we're not left alone, that people care about us individually and about our families. And then one of the builders said, when I go to the grocery store and I see somebody who can't buy something, I have money in my pocket and I can turn around and I can buy that thing for that child who wanted something, so it just keeps rippling through, and the blessings that it just come from this one act. And $18,000 is a lot for some people, and it's not for other people. Like my neighborhood, I live in an average Orem neighborhood, but we banded together and people made salsa and sold it, and had a little bazaar, and we went to the Orem Summer Fest and sold art and different things. And we were able in 6 weeks to get the money together, and we're just literally a middle-class neighborhood. So it's not out of the reach. It's not only businesses that can do it. Or we had families who said, we're going to give up Christmas and this is what we're going to do. Little kids who sold eggs, to give money and
milk
things like
cows.
That. Milk the cows. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's such a wonderful service opportunity for a group of people. If you're going to have a family reunion this summer, why don't you, use your family reunion opportunity and then, receive the video and share it at your family reunion. I mean, it's such a wonderful opportunity to bond together, to do something incredible.
Yeah. And it opens up this channel of connection and love. You have a video of donors who are talking about their experience, and every single donor says how grateful they feel. And it makes so much sense, because I really think that it just flows both ways. The people who receive are filled with connection and gratitude, but it's flowing all around. Like it creates joy for everybody both ways.
Yeah. Well, one of the most important things we do is that every donor chooses the family that they want to give a house to. We have a database of families who we've already vetted. We know that this is not their summer cottage or, something else. They're not wealthy. They have a reason to need this house. And then you can go out onto the website and you can read their stories and decide who you feel close to. And then when the house is gifted, we put a picture of your family in their house, because you have now become part of their family. And they want to connect with you and they want to know who you are. And it's such a wonderful experience. And as we've had the opportunity, we've received letters from Ukrainian families, and we give the donors a picture. And we have a little girl who's 3 years old who lives in Alpine, Utah, who prays for the Husak family that they will be comfy and cozy in their new house. Like every time she prays.
Fundraised for that house.
Yeah.
Her 14-year-old sister.
Yeah, her 14-year-old sister knocked on the doors of the neighbors and raised the money, and their whole family prays for that family. And now they connect with each other, and she's their granddaughter. And with the Ukrainian family, and they talk like once a week, and they just have such a wonderful connection. And so they gained a granddaughter, and she gained 2 more grandparents.
That's amazing.
What a wonderful, amazing connection to have.
I just love that this little girl's sister, Berkeley, she said in an interview, she said that it was so cold in December and they were trying to fundraise and get all the money for this house before the end of the year. And so she was going door to door in her neighborhood and other neighborhoods. And she said that when I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, when I was knocking doors, showing a picture of this family and telling the story of their home, how it got destroyed and they lost everything in an instant. She said, when I couldn't feel my fingers, I just kept thinking about this family and the brutal winter in Ukraine and how cold it is there. And it just kept me going. And I'm just so proud of Berkeley for doing this, because I think she'll remember this for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
Like at the age of 14, you don't have to be, older and wealthy and into your career and have extra money. If you have time to donate, miracles will happen. Just like with Berkeley, she at 14, she learned that she can truly make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah.
And that's miraculous, I think. And that's something that no one will ever take away from you.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about faith crisis on the podcast because I think that's an experience that a lot of people and a lot of listeners are having or have had. And I just kept thinking, like, that experience of doubt can be so destabilizing when you kind of lose touch with the feeling of God and you start really wondering, are we alone in the world? And it feels like this is, at least for me, like this is the fastest way to like get that feeling back. Not a feeling like, okay, the church is the one true church, but there is this love that is so transformative and that feels true. Like this feels true, and I feel like sometimes that's the thing that can be the most healing, finding ways to center on that feeling. And there's just nothing that can compare to the kind of peace that comes with that deep love for someone that you don't know. It's the closest thing I can imagine to what Christ represents.
Pure love of Christ, right? You don't know those people. You've never met them before. You don't know what their life was like 13 months ago. Yeah. But then you enter their life at a place where you have an opportunity to share with them. And you love them. I mean, all these calls we've been on, I don't know any one of them where somebody hasn't said, I love you and I pray for you on both sides.
I will pray for you for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
They say that.
Yeah.
And what I love about that experience and just with many experiences that we've had with the charity, delivering things to the people, the very things they've been praying for. A couple of weeks ago, I was preparing for the Come Follow Me lesson to do with my kids. And the lesson was about Nathaniel and how he reacted when Christ said, I was with you under that olive tree. Like I was there. I was with you. I heard, like, you're at the darkest time. I heard, when you were praying, I heard your prayer. And I think with the charity work that we have done, gifting houses or providing other essential aid, it's like that moment when you answer someone's prayer, like the Lord answered their prayer with the work that you did. And the moment when you give it to them and people say, I've been praying for this. This is the very thing I've been praying for. And it's coming true, because everyone has those moments in their life when only you and God know what you spent all those hours on your knees praying for. It's just you and him. And when the prayer is answered, you think, he knows me. He knows my heart. He was there. Yeah. When I prayed, he was there. He heard every word. And so some of this work we do, and even maybe what you saw in the calls, that's like people experiencing that. Those
assurances that,
like he heard me. He was there when I begged.
Yeah.
And
we, when Aubrey and I were preparing for this podcast, we were talking about that quote from Joseph Smith that says, a man filled with the love of God is not content with blessing his family alone, but it ranges through the world, anxious to bless the whole human race. And as you guys are talking, it kind of, I guess I've been thinking of that. What Joseph Smith is describing there really is the love of Christ. Because even if you think about sort of during his mortal life, he had a fairly small sphere of friends and acquaintances, right? But what we believe and what our theology points to is that the the love that he showed with his sacrifice what ranged throughout the entire world, into future, into past. And I feel like this is the type of thing where we can emulate that just a little bit. Ukraine's about as far away as it gets, you know? And so like we really can reach across the world in sort of emulation of what Christ did on a much larger scale. And I feel like you two are you're making that possible for so many people and the rest of your organization. So I just want to thank you. It's really amazing and beautiful work.
Yeah. To close, maybe Svitlana, there was an idiom that we just learned this last week that someone shared as they were walking through a home. Could you tell us again what that is and what it means? And maybe that would be a good place to end.
Все буде Україна. And so things will work out.
Things will work out.
In Ukraine, things will turn out.
Yeah.
And that's truly the spirit of the Ukrainian people, right? They have faith that it will be okay.
It will be okay somehow.
Yeah. So that's what they say to each other. Say it again.
Все буде Україна.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you both
so much.
Thanks, you guys.
Okay, thanks so much for listening, and a huge thanks to Svitlana and Nancy for coming on. And of course, a huge thanks to the entire team at To Ukraine with Love who have done such remarkable work. If you would like to get involved in these efforts through donations, fundraising through schools or other groups, or know of businesses who may be able to help, we know this team would be forever grateful. But of course, that gratitude pales in comparison to the real impact for men, women, and children in need in Ukraine. The website to go to help is toukrainewithlove.org. Thanks again, as always, for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, you can check out more at faithmatters.org.